Our law firm unapologetically stands up for the rights of the accused.
All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Military Justice Today. I've got Robert Capovilla and Mickey Williams from Capovilla and Williams Law Firm. I'm Matt Starosiak, of course. We are going to talk today about the COVID vaccine, which is an incredibly hot topic inside and outside of the military. But pre-show or pre-topic, I think you guys have some kind of show you've been betting on or watching or trying to recreate or what?
I did not sleep very well last night because my good friend and law partner, Mickey Williams, known in inner circles as Nathaniel Williams, said, "Dude, you need to watch this documentary called 411: The Missing, and then The Hunted." That's the name of the documentary, and it's about these hunters in different national parks across the country who, like, crazy things happen to them. They end up missing. The investigations defy logic and common sense. And so, it's Sunday night. I watched some football during the day, and I'm like, I'm going to watch this documentary. Yeah, bad idea. I'm never hunting again. I'm likely not going to step foot in the woods by myself again.
So is this like Bermuda Triangle? Is this like Bermuda Triangle stuff where people disappear and nobody ever knows what happened?
Yes, I mean the
weirder
one,
stuff than that. Even
just crazy things. I mean, and one was from a place where I spent 8 years of my life, Lima, Ohio. The Predator from Lima, Ohio, which that's the most hoaxy one to me.
And that's why it's the last one.
Yeah,
I think.
But some of them were legit. Like, I was a little spooked, man.
What do you mean Predator? Did they have like Billy cutting his chest at the end on the bridge? Like
it was Mickey in the tree.
No, this
hunting the Predator.
This woman was out. She was in a tree stand in Ohio because that's how they hunt out there. They sit in a tree stand.
The great state of Ohio, Lima, Ohio, actually.
But she was bow hunting, which I thought was admirable. So she was bow hunting in a tree stand, and she sees this figure. Like it had a cloaking device almost, and it just moves from one tree to the next. And at the same time, there's something happening in a football field at that high school.
Shawnee High School, yeah.
And these kids, and they interviewed a bunch of the kids who saw it, see this light that appears from nowhere, and it's like this beam or this circle of light. It's like UFO type stuff. And I kind of like that wild craziness.
Well, they called it the Predator because it looks like from the movie Predator, right? One and two, which is one of the original Predator is one of the greatest action movies of all time. I mean, you can make an argument it might be the best of all time. But when the Predator is invisible and you see it leaping from tree to tree, and you can
kind
just
of
see
blending
the form,
in, sure.
That's what it looked like. But that one wasn't that freaky to me. I spent 8 years outside of Lima, Ohio. I can guarantee you there is no Predator in Lima, Ohio. Now, the ones,
is that because you are the Predator?
No, that's because there's not like
it's in Atlanta right now.
I mean, I would be very surprised if you're the Predator and you could go any place in the world that you wanted to go. I don't know why you'd go to Lima, Ohio.
Cancun or
That's a good argument.
It's not like a jungle. There's no wilderness there, really. I mean, people own plots of land like she did. But anyway, the freakiest one to me was the
old dude.
No, the old guy was really scary. But the hunter who was in Montana,
the crazies,
yeah, and just disappeared. And then they found his stuff after they had already searched those areas.
Oh, man.
I mean, this poor guy, I think he was probably murdered.
Yeah, I think it was a serial killer or something.
I think it was a serial killer.
Because they set up, if anybody wants to watch it, I don't want to give away too much, but they set up like they discover his stuff, his belongings, like his canteen. It's opened with a cup and it's filled up, and this is like the next year.
Yeah, 7 miles from where he disappeared,
and it's right outside a house,
right,
like maybe 100 yards away or half, like 500 yards maybe. But he's like overlooking the way it's set up. You could tell somebody was sitting in there overlooking that landscape, and then they discover this, and the guy went missing. So the question is, well, if he was so close to the house, why didn't he just walk down there?
And this dude's experience, I mean, this dude was a guy who hunted in the crazies 9-10 times a year, they said, and knew it like the back of his hand. So if he's able to hike out of the mountains and make it to a ranch wouldn't he have just walked up to the
Right.
ranch?
Has anybody background checked this stuff though? Because you know what this sounds like to me? It sounds like that movie they did years ago, the Paranormal Activity, where they made it seem like it was a real movie, and then it ended up being
Well,
some BS.
I
at the
haven't
end.
background checked.
Much
it
like
up
a CID investigation, right? You're probably only getting half the truth.
Yeah.
In the documentary, you have to do your own investigation. For all we
Yeah,
know,
like,
this guy had
whole
an ex-wife.
thing could be made up. The whole documentary could be made up.
Well, this guy could have had an ex-wife who had been hunting him for years and wanted him dead, and it would make a lot more sense. Oh man,
He
his
just got
ex-wife
him at the
got
right
him,
time,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Well,
but it was definitely a
What is it called? I'm gonna have to watch it tonight now.
411, The Missing.
No, missing 411.
Yeah,
The Hunted.
Colon the hunted.
The Hunted.
yeah. It was pretty intense. I wouldn't recommend watching it on Sunday night.
Yeah, did you lock your doors last night? You turn your alarm on?
I always have the alarm on, and I always have a weapon next to the bed anyway. But I made sure that the double barrel shotgun was loaded.
There you go.
I was ready. If the predator walked through the door, he was going to walk out with some green blood.
There you go.
I'll tell you that much right now.
Ain't got time, ain't
call
got time
Mickey.
to bleed.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That was way too much banter, by the way.
ain't
People are
got
going to
time
wonder
to
why they're
bleed.
listening
It's
to this.
90 minutes of fun.
All right, so let's jump into our serious topic, very serious topic, and a heated one too, man. There's not too many things I think people disagree more passionately about these days than COVID and the vaccine as part of that. But it's a huge topic right now. You guys are fielding a lot of phone calls from servicemen and women who are concerned about getting the vaccine, might not want to get the vaccine. So that's our topic for today. Let's talk about it. And I guess the first question, the most obvious one, is if you're in the military today, do you have to get the vaccine?
The answer to that question is yes. For those who unfortunately don't want to take the vaccine, and before we dive right into it, so Rob and I thought this was important because, like Matt said, we get so many phone calls, like four or five a day
on this stuff. Yeah.
So we had a discussion and we said, well, let's just put out something that addresses this. That way, folks know that they have a resource that they can go to understand it, and we're going to try to explain the law behind it. But right now, because now that the FDA has approved it, it's no longer experimental. Yes, the military can order you to take it, and the reason for that is because it's presumed to be a lawful order, right? And this we did some case law research on this. It comes from United States v. I think it's Neves, which is 44 MJ 96, which pretty much states that any order is going to be presumed lawful. So the order to take the vaccine is going to be presumed lawful. You can try to challenge it, but courts, it's a question of law, and courts are generally going to say, yeah, that's a lawful order because it's tied directly to a military mission.
So we're going to talk about the timing of when. We're going to talk about any differences between the branches. We're going to talk about the information that's come out. But I think the idea of a lawful order, for somebody like me, it probably has a much different meaning than it does for you guys. But that is the standard right now. The standard is it's considered or presumed to be a lawful order.
Yeah, I think it was the end of August. Our Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, came out with a memo that basically said, hey, everybody's got to get vaccinated now because we're going to have a difficult time enforcing good order and discipline and fighting the nation's wars if everybody's got, COVID. And this is when the Delta variant was kicking out or picking up. So, what essentially came down was, hey, each branch has to implement your own timeline, and you've got to come up with a plan of how you're going to accomplish this. But in our opinion, the Department of Defense, which was supported by the president, in our opinion, there's a direct nexus between our ability to prepare and fight the nation's wars and the vaccine. And because of that, it's presumed to be a lawful order. And, some of these deadlines are interesting.
Yeah, so
I've
it
got them down
sounds
here.
simple, like, okay, that's the end of the podcast episode, but really then there's all the other intricacies of when it happens and how it happens and what your exemptions might be, right? So let's talk through those a little bit.
Well, what you need to know is for different branches, there's some different deadlines, right? For the Army, it's 15 December to be vaccinated if you're active duty soldier, okay? Air Force and Space Force, you have a 2 November deadline, right? Marines and sailors have until 28 November. And then if you're in the reserves, Army Reserves or Army National Guard, you actually have technically, based on the latest material, you have until June 30th, 2022 to get the vaccination, and the Air National Guard members must be vaccinated by December 2nd. And a lot of the folks that we have calling are folks that are actually part of the reserve or guard units, and they're actually, you know, what they're being told is they're not being issued the FDA approved vaccination.
Right.
Their commander's like, you just need to get vaccinated. We don't care which one it is. And so there's some consternation about that. But the bottom line is that the Department of Defense has said this is directly tied to our ability to fight the nation's wars, so you got to get vaccinated.
Why different deadlines? That seems odd to me. It seems like you would want consistency. I mean, not only among the branches, but among reserves and everybody else, because they might interact, right? So why?
Well, reserves is hard because you're only getting together, you know, once a month. Same with the guard, right? Sometimes not even that, right? So it's a little bit different for the guard and the reserves than it is for active duty.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But they just set their own, for active duty, they just set their own timelines.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's right.
In the branches, because each department of the Department of Defense, you have each service, and they are allegedly in control of that one service, so they can set their deadlines, and that was the deadline set by the Army and so on. So yeah, those are their deadlines.
Here's the magic language from the memo, right? Quote, to defend this nation, we need a healthy and ready force. After careful consultation with medical experts and military leadership, and with the support of the president, I have determined, again, this is the defense secretary, I have determined that mandatory vaccination against coronavirus disease is necessary to protect the force and defend the American people. So right there, right, they're putting the nexus in the language and arguing why it is, in fact, necessary. And quite frankly, it makes a lot of sense, right? If we have a force that's plagued with the Delta variant and they can't deploy and go fight, you know, go fight when we need them to, we're going to have a serious problem in this country.
And this isn't a new issue, right? I mean, this issue of vaccinating our service members is certainly not a new, right? I've talked with other folks that say, you know, before they've deployed, they've had, you know, a dozen shots or whatever. Different. Is that right? Is that accurate? It's not a new issue. The government's been saying you have to get these
Mickey,
vaccines for a
Did
while.
you have to ever get a vaccine, man, before you deployed? I personally don't remember getting a vaccine before I deployed.
Well, it's interesting. Back when I was enlisted in the infantry, I had to get the anthrax vaccine. And I think that some of the case law is tied to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this was 2005. They had this mandatory vaccination for the anthrax, and it was the same type. I can't say it's the same type of vaccine as the coronavirus vaccine or the COVID-19 vaccine, but it was, people didn't want to take it. I would say that that people had the same reaction to it, right? But I had it, and I didn't really think much about it at the time. But it wasn't really a question of, hey, should I take this or not? You just had it. You just got it. And what Rob's talking about is the flu vaccine. Right, we got to get that annually every year it happens. And before you deploy, they shoot you up with some stuff right before you get deployed. That one shot that you get in the rear end.
Is that the penicillin shot?
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, drop shorts, man.
But I remember guys. Well, actually, this didn't happen to me personally, but I heard about guys who refused the anthrax vaccine and they got in trouble, right? And we'll talk about the type of punishments you can receive if you refuse it.
Yeah.
So the question, Matt, is, you know, is this an old thing? Yeah. I mean, this is something that they've been doing for a long, long time. This one is just, I think it's tied to politics in a lot of ways about whether or not the vaccine is safe and so on. Military is not supposed to take politics into consideration. They're supposed to do what they're told. And they're being told by the White House and everybody else that they have to get vaccinated, so they're just trying to follow that mission.
And that's, you know, that's a good point in a lot of ways. And here is the reality of signing up for the United States military. You get the privilege of serving your country. You wear the uniform with pride. You get a paycheck. You get benefits. You get wonderful health care. But in return, you have to give up a certain amount of your rights that you otherwise would not have to give up if you did not join the United States military, right? And just one thing that comes to mind, not necessarily a right, but for example, we had a podcast about administrative separation boards. Well, you know, Matt, what happens if the regular person who's not in the military shows up late to work? They get fired. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
In the military, you don't show up to work enough times, you could be like one of Mickey's clients right now and be facing a possible courts martial. So when you decide to put the uniform on, there are a certain amount of rights that you just have to give up. For example, you can't eat yourself to 300 pounds, right? If you're not in the military, eat yourself to 300 pounds.
Why is he looking at me?
In the military, I'm actually thinking about myself and my own struggles to make height and weight over the years.
300 pounds, he leaned in.
But,
do you see him lean in and look at me?
The big point is that, hey, when you join the military, there's just a certain amount of rights you had before that are limited now. And part of that is you got to get a vaccine if they can make an argument, if big government, DOD can make an argument that you need to do it to make sure you're ready to fight the nation's wars. And that's really where this comes from.
Do you think some of the resistance, and I don't want to get into the politics of it much at all, honestly, because it's never that interesting of a discussion. But do you think part of the issue, the apprehension, is the newness of it? So in other words, a vaccine that's been around for 80 years, people probably are not objecting to that as much, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a part of it. People are scared.
I'm a little scared of the newness of it.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
And I sympathize 100% with people who don't want to take it, because I don't think anybody should be forced into anything that they don't want to do. But unfortunately, if you're in the military, like Rob said, you don't really have that luxury. You gotta do what you're told. But I think that the fact that there were questions about the rush to get it out, and whether or not it's actually even effective, I think those are laudable concerns. And unfortunately for the military, you're not allowed to have those concerns. You just got to take it, or you got to face the repercussions, unless, and I think we're going to talk about this now, you qualify for one of the exemptions. In other words, how do you get out of taking the vaccine if you don't want it?
Well, one thing I'll say, too, is we're not getting as many calls from active duty service members about the vaccine. It's a lot of reservists and a lot of guardsmen, because they're not quite as organized, right? And we've had folks say, hey, they're putting a lot of pressure on me to get a vaccine that's not been approved. I understand that, right? There's a lack of organization with a lot of times those units that are not active duty. And I get that. I side with Mickey too. I understand not wanting to put something in your body that you don't really trust. The military's position is we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, if you go back to World War II and probably before, but World War II, there's old photographs of service members standing in line, hundreds of them at a time, and nurses on both sides popping them in the arms as they go. I mean, this has been part of the culture for a long time. And to touch on the case law, Mickey's right. We first, anthrax, this issue came up. It went all the way to what's now called CAF, right, our highest level of appeal, and that was a case called U.S. versus Schwartz, and basically the court came back and said, hey, look, unless there's an exemption or an exception, you got to take the vaccine.
Yeah. And you know that going in, right? I would assume you sign papers when you enlist, and when you join, it says you're going to do these things. No?
Well, I don't know if you think too much about it. At least me, when I joined up, I didn't think about the number of shots I'd have to take, but it wasn't, you show up to med that, you go as a unit or whatever, and you get your shots done, and it sucks and it's uncomfortable, and you got to pull your pants down in front of, some nurse, and you get a shot in your butt, and then you move on with your day.
Capovilla is thinking, if I can do 2 shots 100 proof on a Friday night, then I shouldn't have any problem with whatever they want to stick in me, right?
Well, I think Rob's point's a good one, too. To me, the major concern is, am I going to go overseas and become disfigured or horribly maimed, or lose my life? That's usually what you're thinking about when you join it. And if you're willing to put that at risk, then you're probably not even thinking about any vaccinations or anything. I don't think I thought of anything about
That's
it.
interesting perspective.
It's kind of
an interesting perspective.
I personally, I think you should get the vaccine, right? Whether you're in the service or not. But I respect the folks who don't want to, because isn't that part of the fabric of being an American? I mean, weren't we a country that was founded to stand up to what we felt was a government based on tyranny and taxation without representation? I mean, rebelling against the government to some extent is part of the American fabric. So I've appreciated the folks who have called in and explained the reasons why they don't want to get the vaccine. Ultimately, I think it's going to be a losing battle for 99.9% of them.
Well, let's talk about the exemptions to it. So I would assume there are some, and maybe some are more solid than others, for lack of a better term. Or
I'll lay out kind of the official position, right? What the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said, right? Austin memo noted that the new requirement will allow for exemptions that are consistent with current policies for all other vaccines. Permanent exemptions include serious medical reactions to the vaccine, immune deficiency such as HIV infection, and evidence of existing immunity by a serologic antibody test or documentation of previous infection or natural infection presumed.
Lord, what does all that mean?
So that there's a lot going on there, right? And they also talk about the administrative exemptions, including one for religious reasons, which we've dealt with, right? The religious exemption is granted by the military service based on their policies, and it appears to be relatively rare. The decision is made by commanders based on consultation with medical personnel and chaplains whether you would qualify for the religious exemption. And there's been religious exemptions for military service, for as long as we've been in a country.
Yeah, headwear is a
Right.
big one. So
Now, none of this is new. None of this is new. This, in fact, I think it's in the memo, or I think it was in some information put out maybe by the Secretary of the Army, that if you're going to apply for an exemption of some sort to these vaccines, you probably should have applied for an exemption to other vaccines too, not just wait until the COVID vaccine is a point
Good
the
point.
Army's making right now, right?
Yeah, good point.
And I think that is a good point. So I know we're helping some soldiers and things like that with the administrative exception for the antibody test, right? If you can show that you're essentially immune because of antibodies, there is some room there where you could potentially get an exemption. But it's look, it's a long shot. That's
But
what I
there's
tell
so much
everybody.
debate right now too about immunity, though. I mean, that's debated every day. As who's immune, how long do you have immunity? But there is an exemption for it.
Yeah.
And you can take a test, and if it comes back with the antibodies, then you don't have to take it for some amount of time, it sounds like.
Well, I think the problem is, so you apply for the exemption. Rob's talking about the medical exemption right now for prior infection. The approval authority is not the general. It's not nobody in your chain of command. It's the Surgeon General of the entire military. So that guy or gal is likely just how they feel that day. Do we need to approve this? And if their position is, we don't care if you have a prior infection, we don't think you deserve it. It's completely at their discretion. So I think Rob's right. It is you file for the exemption. You're probably going to lose, though, at least on those grounds, because the position is everyone should get the vaccine.
The good news is they can't take action against you while you wait the result of essentially your exemption request. Right. And there are also some other exceptions out there that I've read. I have no idea if they've been successful, but like if you're set to retire in the next 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, they're not making you do it. But by and large, the government has a way of getting what it wants.
Yeah.
Whether it's more tax dollars or whatever the case may be. They're going to get what they want here. And really, it's no different than what they've been doing for the past 100 years. In the Spanish-American War, we had soldiers go to Cuba and come back with serious malaria infections. We lost, I think, 3 times as many soldiers to disease in that war as we did to enemy fire. It may even be 5 times. And that's the kind of thing, my God, could you imagine if that happened to a U.S. force today? They'd be coming back at the government like you didn't protect our soldiers while they were deployed. So I understand why they're doing this. I get it. I'm a little bit of a libertarian myself, so I understand the people who are like, I'm not taking the shot. But you can't have the best of both worlds. You can't serve your country, get the benefits, and then also say, I'm not doing certain
Yeah, I think
things.
you could argue this thing. I mean, you could say pick a side,
Right.
make a debate exercise out of it, and you could argue across the board different things. But it's interesting you say that there's a timing component to it. So if somebody does file an exemption, there's a process, obviously. How long, do we know how long that takes? Is it still up in the air, or it's so
They're going to
brand new we don't
streamline
know?
it. They're going to streamline it. Right now, it's taking a while, especially for the medical one, because it's got to go up to the Surgeon General, right? The administrative one, however, those can be pretty much handled at the GCMCA level, at the command level. And the administrative ones have to do with what Rob was talking about with regard to retirement, or if you're out processing, you're going to be out within 30 days. Are we going to make this guy get the vaccine? Are we going to flag him and keep him in and I guess give him NJP or court-martial him for not taking, even though he's going to be out in 30 days or not? Those ones, it's good if you file for an exemption in that case, because you're going to be out of the military by the time those go through. Yeah. But those are the ones that they're really trying to streamline, because it is administrative in nature and not the medical portion, which has to go all the way up to the TSG.
All right, and so what happens? What happens if somebody is just dead set against it? They're just not going to do it, and they're not somebody who's going to be out in 30 days, or they've just enlisted or whatever, and they're like, I'm absolutely not doing this, then what are the penalties to that person?
Well, they vary. Typically, what you're going to see is a direct order. The commander will say you're going to have this amount of time to make a decision, and if you don't do it, I'm going to say you're in violation of a lawful order, at which point they're likely going to be issued a Article 15 non-judicial punishment for a violation of a lawful order under Article 92 of the UCMJ. That at that moment in time, and we've talked about this, that service member is going to have a decision to make. Do they accept the Article 15 and be found guilty, or do they turn it down or risk going to trial for it? And if you turn it down, like you have the right to do, now the command is in a tricky position. Do we just let this service member turn it down, or do we need to set an example to everybody? This is what's going to happen to you if you don't take the vaccine, in which case they would take you to a court-martial, or they would separate you and try to give you either an other than honorable or a general discharge.
Could this clog the system if there's a large number of folks that want to fight this, they don't want to go along with it? Could it clog the system?
I don't know if it'll clog the system or not. I don't see these cases. Mickey might be right. There might be some that go to court-martial. I think I've not come across anything like that. I think the most likely scenario here is going to be separation action, right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to notify these guys of generals or honorables and just paper them out, right? Because if you've got more than 6 years and you don't want to take the COVID vaccine and they notify you of separation, you've got the right to the set board, and you can go fight it all you want. I find it hard to believe that the board is going to say, well, you should stay in, right? That would be a very interesting scenario.
Especially if they all took the vaccine.
Right, because they probably all had to take the vaccine.
Yeah.
And if you don't have 6 or more years in, they're just going to notify you of a general discharge or an honorable discharge, and they're going to paper you out. That's what I think's likely going to happen. I hope that none of these guys get like general discharges or other than honorables,
because it hurts their.
I mean, if you don't want this the best argument, in my opinion, is this was a vaccine that was not in existence when a lot of these folks joined, and now they're being told they got to take the vaccine. I think if they want out, just honorable them and get them out.
Yeah.
Now that's what makes sense to me. The military doesn't always do what makes sense, especially on the military justice side of things. But I certainly hope that they'll just get these people out as quick as they can and give them their honorables and let them go on with their life.
What advice would you guys give to somebody who might not want to get it, or isn't sure they want to get it, or they're not really sure what their options are? I mean, what I always worry about is somebody going on social media and getting contaminated with all the incorrect information out there. I mean,
that does not happen.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't happen, Matt.
You get your information from Instagram or TikTok, and but what advice would you give to folks that are not, or even their family members, they're not sure where to turn, what to do?
Well, I would say you need to ask yourself, do you want to be in the military or not? Because
that's right.
If you don't take the vaccine, you're going to be out of the military. If you do take it, you'll stay in. It's just what matters more to you, your military career or your bodily integrity. And if it's bodily integrity, you're going to probably get a general discharge. And if you're fine with that, then that's the route you take. Because right now, just to summarize, it's a lawful order. You got to take the vaccine if you're going to serve unless you qualify for one of the exemptions. Likely not going to get an exemption. So then you're going to be stuck in a very difficult position at that time. Take it or not take it.
You do things when you're in the military. You do things every day you don't want to do, right?
That sounds like life.
I mean, go take a poll of the average unit in the United States Army, right? And ask them, do you want to get up at 5:30 and PT in the cold? I would imagine half of them would probably say no.
We know
right?
one guy who would.
Well, Mickey,
that's what I mean.
Mickey would
He's
PT.
sitting right here.
You know, that's the way he is.
He'd say it's 20 below. It's not cold enough.
But you know,
be like, can you cool this place down?
You do it. You got to get up and PT in the cold because the military says, let's just say the Army says, we need to do this to make sure we're physically fit to fight a war. You know. The COVID vaccine, the logic is not that different. You need to take the vaccine, from our perspective, so that you can help fight the nation's wars.
Yeah.
And I like I said, I do sympathize with the folks that don't want to get it. But at the end of the day, the government's going to win this fight.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up with your prediction on Mickey's next PT test. I mean, what is he going to earn his record, beat his record, tie? Where is he going to shake out on the thing?
Well, we got to talk about this.
He's running a lot right now because he wasn't pleased with his 2 mile time. And he does it in secret. Nobody knows where he doesn't work out with
Like
anybody.
2 a.m, he's over at Dupree.
He does this in
Dupree
secret.
Park.
And then he'll be like, oh, I'm not going to really try hard. And then he'll go out and beat everybody. But, hey, look, he's competitive, and that's why he's a good trial lawyer in part 2. So I appreciate it. But, yeah, no, he's got PT on the mind right now.
We just talk about him like he's not in the room. And here he is.
I think I will do better. I think Rob will do better, too. Rob's been training quite a bit.
Could he do any worse?
Oh, yeah. Rob did a great job on the ACFT.
The ACFT is not the problem. It's my weight. That's
the height,
problem.
weight.
I think you look great. I think you look wonderful.
Well, I mean, look, there's in shape for normal
be
civilians, and there's in shape for United States soldiers, and I look a little bit like a blueberry in my uniform these days, and I had a commanding general used to call them lumpy soldiers. I look a little lumpy,
Yeah.
The love handles stick out over the waist on the sides a little bit, and hey, it is what it is.
What do they say? Father Time is undefeated. Isn't that the saying they always use for the athletes? Father Time is undefeated. He gets everybody eventually.
Unless you're Tom Brady, that's a fact.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap it up, guys. Great segment on the COVID vaccine. I think it's super, super helpful. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of our most watched episodes based on the topic and kind of how heated it is. But signing off for Robert Capovilla, Mickey Williams, Matt Starosiak. We'll catch up with everybody next time.
This session is adjourned.